The dust in the Afghan air was a persistent, gritty presence, settling on skin, clogging the barrels of rifles and turning the vibrant blue of the sky into a muted, hazy gray. For Commander Eva Thorne, it was simply part of the job. She breathed it in, a fine grit that tasted of arid earth and spent gunpowder, a flavor she had come to associate with success. Her new team, however, was having a harder time adjusting. They hadn't adjusted to her either. Eva was an enigma to the men of SEAL Team 7's Bravo platoon. They called themselves the Marauders, a moniker earned through a decade of brutal, successful operations. Their platoon commander, a hulking, scowling lieutenant named Jake Viper Riley, had a deep, abiding suspicion of change, and Eva Thorne was the most significant change they'd faced. A promotion had moved their old commander, a man they'd bled with, and in his place came a legend they had never heard of. Eva Ghost Thorne. Her reputation preceded her in official files, if not in the hallowed halls of the mess hall. She was a sniper, a former DevGru operator with a record of quiet surgical precision. But here, in the dirt and the grit of the forward operating base, her reputation meant nothing. They saw her as an outsider. And worse, they saw her as a woman. Jake made no secret of his skepticism. He watched her from across the briefing table, his eyes narrowed, his jaw set. She was small, compact, and her movements were unnervingly precise. She didn't speak unless she had something to say, and when she did, her voice was low, devoid of inflection, but always carrying the weight of command. "Ghost," he'd grumbled to his second-in-command, Master-at-Arms First Class Ken Brick Hardy. "What kind of name is that? Sounds like she's never seen a fight. I like a commander I can see, one who can stand in the open with me." Brick, a man with a frame as wide as his nickname suggested, simply shrugged. "The official file says she's the real deal, Viper. Says she's got more kills than a plague." "Official files don't tell me anything about heart," Jake had retorted. "Files don't tell me if she'll freeze up when the bullets start flying. This isn't a training op, Brick. This is real." Their first mission under her command was a recon of a suspected Taliban arms cache in an abandoned industrial complex in a small town called Lely. The intel was solid, the target was high value, and the risks were considerable. As they geared up, the tension was palpable. The Marauders were used to loud, fast-paced assaults. Eva's plan was a slow, deliberate crawl, a sniper's game. She had briefed them on the mission, her voice a calm monotone, outlining a plan for silent infiltration, observation, and a precise exfiltration with the intel. The team was to provide overwatch and security as she documented the cache. "My overwatch position is the highest point," she had said, pointing to a rusty, skeletal silo on the map. "I'll have a clear line of sight on the target and the surrounding area. Brick, your team will be at the main entrance. The rest of you will set up a perimeter." Jake had objected immediately. "Commander, that silo is exposed. We could be seen from miles away. My team and I can set up closer, give you better cover." Eva's gaze was unwavering. "Viper, the point of my position is to see everything, not just the target. It's a high-risk, high-reward approach. The advantage of height outweighs the risk of exposure. We move in silently, we set up, we do the job, and we get out. Understood?" Jake had saluted, his jaw tight. "Understood, Commander." The rest of the team felt the resentment. It wasn't just his insubordination. It was the way she had dismissed his experienced opinion with such quiet certainty. The infiltration went as planned. Eva moved like a shadow, her slim form blending into the darkness and the desolate landscape. She was a woman of paradoxes. Small, yet strong, quiet, yet in command, unassuming, yet utterly lethal. They moved through the labyrinth of derelict buildings, the only sound the soft crunch of their boots on broken concrete. As they approached the industrial complex, the atmosphere shifted. A heavy stillness replaced the usual sounds of the wind and distant wildlife. This place felt dead, a tomb. Eva felt a cold prickle on the back of her neck. Something was wrong. She reached the base of the silo, her team in tow. The rusted metal of the latter was a monument to decay. Eva began to climb, her movements fluid and practiced. Halfway up, she stopped and turned. "Viper," she said, her voice a whisper in the wind. "You have a bad feeling." It wasn't a question. Jake was startled. He hadn't said a word. He looked at her, then down at the ground. Just the silence. "It's too quiet." "I agree," Eva said, her blue eyes scanning the rooftops and windows. "We're not the first ones here. Be ready." She continued. Her ascent, reaching the top platform, a circular metal grate with a commanding view of the entire complex. The air up here was colder, the wind more insistent. She set up her rifle, a long-range precision rifle, with practiced ease. The Marauders took their positions below, their rifles at the ready. Eva peered through her scope, her eye a window into a world of incredible detail. She swept the scope over the warehouse where the cache was supposed to be, then slowly panned across the surrounding area. She saw things the human eye would never pick up. The faint glint of light on a sniper's rifle in a third-floor window of a building 300 meters away. The barely perceptible bulge of a jacket on a rooftop, indicating a hidden assailant. The fresh churn of dirt near a collapsed wall, a sign of a recently dug trench. Her heart rate remained steady, her breathing calm. This wasn't a cache, it was a trap. They were waiting. They were baiting the trap with a fake target, and they had walked right into it. "Viper," she said into her comms, her voice a low urgency. "Scrap the mission. It's a dry hole, and we're in a trap." Before Jake could respond, a single shot rang out from an unseen position. It hit the metal support next to Eva's head with a high-pitched ping. The return fire was a cacophony of sound. Bullets sprayed the silo and the buildings where her men were positioned. The ambush was sprung, the air filled with the angry buzz of lead, the sharp cracks of rifle fire, and the frantic shouts of her team. "They've got us pinned!" Jake's voice was strained, filled with fury. "We're taking heavy fire from the east and north. We need suppressive fire, Ghost." "Now." Eva remained silent. She didn't even flinch. She was counting. The gunshots, the direction, the patterns. She could feel the number of enemies in the air, a presence she had come to recognize. 12. She saw them now through her scope, little blips of movement, small flashes of light, and the telltale smoke of their rifles. Jake's voice, now laced with panic, was a desperate plea. "Ghost, what are you doing? Fire! We're going to be overrun." "She's a fraud," one of the men yelled. "She's not doing a damn thing." Eva ignored them all. She had 12 enemies, all positioned to pin down her team and then close in for the kill. They were confident, aggressive, and had the element of surprise. But they hadn't counted on a ghost. She adjusted her rifle, her fingers a dance of precision on the scope's dials. She took a deep breath, held it, and exhaled slowly. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. The first shot was not for a person. It was for a brick wall, just above a prone enemy soldier. The bullet struck the brick with a sharp crack, sending a shower of pulverized concrete and dust into the air, blinding the soldier, who instinctively raised his head. The second shot was for his head. The next target was an enemy machine gunner positioned on a rooftop. He was a menace, his heavy bursts of fire keeping Jake's team pinned down. She didn't aim for the man, she aimed for the belt of ammunition, on his rifle, a delicate, almost impossible shot from her distance. The bullet struck true, a shower of sparks and loose rounds exploding as the machine gunner's weapon malfunctioned, the burst of fire ceasing instantly. The Marauders, huddled, behind flimsy cover, felt the sudden relief. "What was that?" Brick yelled, his voice a mixture of awe and confusion. Eva was already moving on. She took out a sniper in a window, a quick, clean headshot that was over before anyone could register it. The sniper's rifle slid from the window and clattered to the street below. She saw 2 more combatants moving to flank Brick's team. She didn't have a clear shot at their heads, so she aimed for their legs, both shots hitting home with a sickening thump. They went down, screaming, their flanking. Maneuver a failure. The enemy forces were starting to lose their rhythm. They were confused. The sniper they had been told about, the one they thought they had cornered, was dismantling their team with an almost supernatural speed. They couldn't locate her. She was a ghost, a whisper in the wind that delivered death with cold, calculated efficiency. A new enemy sniper, a high-value target himself, took a shot at her position. She felt the bullet graze the metal platform, a near miss. She had 2 minutes and 47 seconds remaining. She knew where he was now. High on the roof of a building across the street, partially obscured by a chimney. She aimed, not for his head, but for the glass of the scope he was looking through. A single shot shattered the glass, sending shards into his eye and blinding him. He fell backward, disoriented and screaming. A team of 3 enemy soldiers, confident they had found her, began to move in. They were a tight formation, rifles at the ready. They were moving from building to building, seeking to close the distance. Eva watched them, her heart rate now a steady, calm rhythm. She waited until they were in a perfect line, a tactical error born of overconfidence. Her first shot took out the man in the back, the weakest link. Her second took out the man in the front, the leader. The third soldier in the middle froze, his eyes wide with terror, not knowing what to do. He had watched 2 of his men die in front of him, and he had no idea where the shots were coming from. He didn't have time to find out. The final shot from Eva's rifle found its mark. The shouts of the marauders had ceased, replaced by a stunned, awed silence. They heard the pop of her rifle, a soft, distant sound, but they saw the results. They saw enemies fall, one by one, their assaults crumbling before their eyes. The siege was lifting, not because of their defensive fire, but because of one woman, on a silo, doing what she did best. The last 3 enemies were the final threat. They were a small team with an RPG, moving to take out Eva's silo. They were exposed, moving quickly, but Eva was faster. Her first shot took out the man carrying the RPG, hitting him in the shoulder and forcing him to drop the weapon. The second man, the one with a rifle, looked up at the silo, his face a mask of rage and terror. The third man, the one with the knife, lunged for the dropped RPG. Eva fired her final shots. 1 bullet hit the second man squarely in the chest. The third bullet hit the abandoned RPG rocket, causing a massive, deafening explosion that vaporized the third man and sent a shockwave that rattled the entire complex. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence filled with the echoes of gunfire and the weight of death. The ambush was over. The 12 enemies were neutralized. The whole operation had taken 4 minutes and 38 seconds. The marauders, their faces streaked with dust, and sweat emerged from their cover. They looked around, their eyes scanning the rooftops, the windows, the streets. They saw the bodies, the discarded weapons, the proof of what had just happened. They saw a battlefield where a ghost had swept through and left only silence in her wake. They looked up at the silo, and Eva was already gone. She was on her way down, packing up her rifle and her gear, a ghost returning to the shadows. Jake, his face a mixture of shock and utter awe, was the first to reach her at the base of the silo. His condescension was gone, replaced by a respect so profound it was almost a form of fear. "Commander," he said, his voice hoarse. "What? How did you—" Eva didn't look at him. She was focused on her rifle, meticulously cleaning the barrel. "They were overconfident, Lieutenant. They thought we were an easy target. They showed me their hands, and I took them all. It's a common mistake." The team, now huddled around them, was silent. They looked at her, at the small, unassuming woman who had just saved their lives and had single-handedly eliminated an entire enemy force. They had judged her by her size, her gender, her quiet demeanor. They had underestimated her. They had laughed, they had grumbled, and they had believed she would fail. And she had shown them, in a terrifying, beautiful display of skill, that she was more capable than any of them could have ever imagined. Back at the forward operating base, the after-action report was a mix of confusion and awe. The official report stated that SEAL Team 7 had engaged and eliminated 12 enemy combatants in a coordinated ambush. It mentioned the commander's decisive action and the team's quick response. But the truth was, it was one woman. One ghost. Jake and his team were changed men. The Marauders were no longer just a group of tough guys. They were a team that had a ghost in their midst. A silent guardian who could take out an entire force before they even knew she was there. They had learned a lesson that day more valuable than any training. They had learned that in the chaos of war, true power is often quiet, unassuming, and utterly lethal. They had learned to trust their commander, not because she was a man or because she was a legend, but because she was a ghost who always saw more than everyone else. The aftermath and a change of command. The next 2 weeks were a blur of patrols, debriefings, and the heavy silence of newly earned respect. The Marauders had a new walk. The swagger was gone, replaced by professional humility. They still called themselves the Marauders, but it no longer felt like a title of bravado. It felt like a team. One evening, Jake found Eva in the mess hall, sitting alone just as she had been since she arrived. He approached her table, a tray in his hand. He placed it down and sat opposite her without a word. The silence was thick, filled with the unspoken weight of his pride and her patience. "Commander," he finally said, his voice low and strained, "about that day, I was wrong." Eva took a bite of her ration. "About what, Lieutenant?" "About everything," he admitted, his eyes fixed on his plate. "About your plan. About your judgment. About you. I judged you before you even had a chance." Eva finished her bite and met his gaze. Her eyes were as clear and deep as the sky. "I didn't need you to believe in me, Jake. I needed you to do your job. You did that. And you learned to trust your gut when you felt the silence was wrong. That's what matters." Her words weren't a forgiveness, but an acceptance. A quiet, professional acknowledgement that the past was just that. The past. From that moment on, a new understanding was forged. It wasn't about friendship or camaraderie. It was about the fundamental, life-or-death trust that a team needs to survive. A week later, they were in a debriefing with a senior officer, a captain whose face was a roadmap of a long and difficult career. He had a reputation for being ruthless in his assessments, a man who saw no place for sentiment. "The after-action report is a marvel," the captain said, his eyes scanning the data. "I read that Bravo platoon engaged and neutralized a full enemy squad with minimal casualties. Excellent work, Lieutenant Riley." Jake stiffened. "It wasn't my work, Captain. It was Commander Thorne's. She saw the ambush before we did, and she took out the enemy on her own." The captain looked up, his gaze moving to Eva, who stood silent and still. "On her own, with no suppressive fire from the rest of the team? That's an egregious tactical risk, Commander. What if you had missed? What if a single one of those 12 had broken through?" Before Eva could answer, Jake spoke up, his voice a steady, firm counterpoint. "She didn't miss, sir. The first target was blinded. The second was disarmed. The third was a headshot. Then she took out 2 more with leg shots. Then she blinded their sniper. Then she took out 3 men in a line. Then she took out the RPG team. In less than 5 minutes. Sir, she ended the fight. She wasn't taking a risk. She was demonstrating a level of skill that is completely off the charts. We trusted her. We didn't fire because she told us to hold. We knew she had it." The captain stared at Jake, a long, searching look. He then turned his gaze to Eva, a flicker of something new, respect, and maybe a touch of fear in his eyes. Eva said nothing. Her posture was erect, her expression impassive. She was simply a professional who had done her job. The captain closed the folder on the table. "Very well, Commander Thorne. I see your tactics have not only yielded success but have also forged a new kind of trust in your team. That is a rare commodity. I'll make a note of it." The meeting was over. The Marauders had not only been saved by their new commander, they had defended her. They were no longer a unit that saw a woman in a man's world. They were a team, and she was their ghost. A ghost they trusted completely. Eva Thorne, the sniper, the commander, the ghost, was a part of the Marauders now, and they were ready for whatever she threw at them next.